GPT, this is what you have taken from Wikipedia, and generate you the report so that as a student, as a writer, you know how you have worked and how you progressed on your writing. And so that's a very sort of a powerful reflection of how you work on your assignments or any other writing. And as well as in a classroom, for example, we are talking a lot about transparency and creating trust with instructors. That's one of the ways, if agreed to share, this can kind of, the students can share that work with instructors to say that, hey, this is how I worked on my piece of writing, sort of to eliminate all the fear of plagiarism and all of the negative connotations that may come with that. But that's one of the key ones that we have for immediate feedback.
Yeah, those are really good examples of sort of some guided self-assessment. That's something we want students to do on their own anyway, right? But if they can have an AI tool right there that, maybe takes away some of that stigma of asking for assistance or asking for that sort of low-level feedback initially, then that can maybe elevate their work that much more, maybe, right? Yeah, great. Let's maybe try another topic, or we'll just kind of keep going with some different sort of related topics. You mentioned also it being compared to a rubric, and so we can kind of maybe we can touch on sort of the topic of ways that AI can maybe analyze the assessment data to provide insights to student learning. So many of your tools will provide information to the instructor, and then it's kind of up to the instructor to kind of do what they need to do with that information. So that's a way that it can improve learning. So maybe if a couple of you would like to kind of speak to that topic.
So those of you who are familiar with Turnitin probably are familiar with several different tools that we have that do the similar kinds of things. Feedback Studio, Draft Coach deals is for the students, and there's some other things that are in the works that we have coming forth that will do those kinds of things. And the value in that is combining what I like to say, although it's not like the approved company line, but it's my line, that to take that human piece, that pedagogy, and combine it with that technology is going to be the power, I believe, of AI. I've been hearing variations on that theme all day, so it's kind of exciting to hear that from other people in the field, and that's how they're looking at it. And that it's not just the machines are taking our jobs. And, the last speaker in here, the fireside chat, he was speaking about job security, and there are a lot of fears about this. And I like to think that none of us in here are in danger of losing our jobs as educators, because it's that human element, developing those critical skills necessary to interpret the score, whether it's, no matter what company you're talking about or what AI tool, finding those specialized things. Now, I do think that there is a danger in some of the students have this familiarity. I was listening to people talking to, I talk to AI all day, and I get advice from this, and I hear students talking about, well, what am I'm going to this event, these are my outfits, what do I wear, and talking to it like it's a best friend. And so that's, finding the, I guess, kind of garbage in, garbage out kind of thing, and teaching how to do that with critical thinking skills is, I think, the power that we bring to the AI, not just the other way around.
Thank you.
So hi, everyone. I'm from Meazure Learning. You guys are probably most familiar with ProctorU, which is our remote proctoring company under the Meazure umbrella. We also do exam development. That's a big part of our business. And so what's interesting about AI, like Karen said, it is to use it as a tool to critically think. And what we see in industry is right now, because we work not only with institutions, but we work with a lot of certifications, right? And a lot of licensure programs, admissions exams. And there is a fundamental shift that has been happening for a while. I mean, we're all familiar with, authentic assessments, alternative assessments. We're going to speak more detail about that later. But even in highest levels of certification, there's a fundamental shift that the industry and the industries that we're a part of are outgrowing the competency and skills of the people within those professions. So when I think a lot about your seminal kind of, when you're at an institution, a four-year college, your seminal learning experience, we have to move to a model that is constantly evaluating ever-changing kind of skills and competencies, right? And we all know, I mean, we've experienced, because our company works a lot in workforce where people finish a four-year degree and they're behind, right? And they have to be re-educated. So it's really interesting when we talk about using these tools in academia, that it's the faculty's getting real feedback about where their students are with learning and understanding competencies. And then more broadly, even evaluating themselves, are they really learning what they need to learn to be in a certain profession? And what does that mean? I mean, what does this degree mean, and how does it connect with the profession? So it's very exciting to me, because I do see, collaboration. I mean, this morning, a lot of what he spoke about was us designing it as academics. Even, I'm a former academic, still always an academic, but work for a company now. But it's kind of on us to redesign this entire space. And I love that, because it is a shift of, let's wait and see what happens and then talk about it, to designing with purpose and collaborating, and this conference actually is a great forum for that, great example. So
yeah, thank you. Appreciate y'all's insights on those items, and us being able to use data and personalize learning for students especially. Let's maybe find some other topics that we can discuss. Maybe talking about what new types of assessments might be available now because of AI, such as maybe there are simulations that we could use with our students, virtual reality, and maybe how do these new formats enhance the learning experience? So maybe what types of new assessments are you guys seeing?
I can start here. I just want to acknowledge first that developing assessments is really hard, right? And developing good assessments is especially hard. I just want to acknowledge that it's really hard work when you think about it. I suppose with this shift, as we are moving and trying to kind of work with Gen AI, right? I just wanted to also to acknowledge that 2 years ago, November, right? It's going to be almost 2 years since the ChatGPT was released. And I was reflecting here in the conference, just listening to everybody, all these excellent conversations, how quickly actually, I don't know if it's quick, but 2 years is relatively quick in terms of like universities. And I was in Coursera at the time working with a lot of universities as well, not knowing what ChatGPT or Gen AI is, to suddenly all of us thinking about it and trying to actually make sense what it means for institutions, what it means for our courses, what it means for our curriculum, what it means for assessments, for skills of the future. And there is so much on everybody's shoulders right now. But that's a huge shift within a short period of time. And as I speak to different sort of faculty members across different universities, the amount of work that has been done is actually tremendous. And I think we're at a point where there is a lot of new things that have been tried by many people, and a lot of it could be shared and cross-shared and learned faster now. And I think it's just expanding those networks and talking to other universities and schools, cross schools, gonna give like a faster boost in terms of how we learn about what a great assessment is, or what an optimal assessment is in the age when we are so sort of, grappling with so many tools out there. Just to maybe give a few examples, I've seen a lot of schools. I also have a child in college as well, so I always have these conversations in terms of how they're sort of using AI and how their assessments are different. And I've seen that for many courses, and of course it's going to be different across disciplines. There are so many schools and disciplines involved, but teachers are more focusing now on group work. They're trying to objectively assess the skills and the capacity and learning of individual students. The project-based work is more prevalent in terms of students. Instead of writing a final paper, how do a team of students can come together and present a project, develop a product, pitch it, and get a grade based on that? I'm seeing a lot of faculty members breaking down the assignments so that they can across the term actually get to know the students and the ability of individual students, so that at the end of it, the grade is not based on one particular big writing work, but is actually assessed more objectively. And the Gen AI really, because like now that we can use it, we can actually test it, right, for our assessments. We can refine, we can see what it's going to give us as a result. We know what students going to get if they're going to use it. And that gives us an opportunity to kind of assess what's missing, how to refine assessments, how to improve assessments. And once we get it, it's actually easier for faculty now, for instructors to break it down as well, to maybe have a few touch points during the term, to kind of have different smaller assessments during the term. So that's once that refinement is made, and once you understand what those tools are missing and where you can get students sort of probe them to get creative around certain assessments, then it's faster to use it. And it also gives an opportunity to kind of create many versions. Like if you create one assessment, recreating a few versions of it is so easy as well with Gen AI, because if you have 6 students who missed something, or you need to tailor the assessment to different needs of different students, it's also it gives you that opportunity. So there are obviously sort of a side of it where we, as a faculty, we need to kind of reimagine and sort of understand how creative and how we can test the cognitive ability of our students in a different way to get the creativity out. And also, there are opportunities on the other side that helps us work much faster and recreate things. So I think there are sort of a balance, and it's a good, healthy balance. It helps us to improve the curriculum and the way we create assessments.
Mm-hmm. Good points about just incorporating good pedagogy there too, right? Like taking the information, chunking it down for students so they're completing a piece at a time. Then they maybe won't be tempted to have AI do the entire thing, because you have built in those guidelines and those steps and encouraged them to create meaningful work, maybe getting some feedback from AI along the way, or from you, or from both, and all of that. That's great. Anyone else like to speak to that? We could also speak to project-based learning as well. So alternative assessments, things of those nature.
I'll speak about VR because we've had a lot of experience with this recently. And it's so interesting to me because even when I was a faculty member, we were using some sort of simulation. I don't know if you guys remember, even back in the day, there were companies that you could go and simulate being in a place. And I think Sims was we would build out Oregon Trail. Hey, that's the original. Life. That's the OG of all OGs VR, for sure. But when I in fact use this in online courses when I was teaching at the other university that shall remain nameless down the road, but it would crash. Like it was just the technology it was so cool, but then ultimately, it didn't work, or it was kind of more work than, that was worth it, so to speak. So what's interesting to me about the use of VR now is that what we're seeing, and this is kind of all over the industry, is there are lots of shortages among many professions, right? Healthcare, we work a lot with crane operators and heavy equipment. So heavy equipment, major shortage in that industry. But a lot of the reason is because because cost. And it's because, so if this is, extreme example, but just crane operators, it's very expensive to do a certificate, to learn how to actually operate a crane. You have to have the space, you have to have the machinery. So, and that's a lot of the heavy equipment professions and professions of that nature. So now they're utilizing VR because you need a lot of these professions, you can't just read it in a book and do it. You need to feel it. You need to touch it. I mean, medical professions, that's, these practicums. So it's a really interesting movement where I think I spoke with a lot of folks at this conference and they were like, oh yeah, we're using VR in healthcare. We're using VR in teaching, some simulation. I mean, even in mental health, simulating an experience where you have an AI responding as a patient. Because it is difficult. I mean, you're booking time and it's expensive and it's, so that's where I see kind of the exciting part of this. The positive part is, will it replace the real thing? No, but a lot of great practice, and that's what we actually learned with the crane operators, just FYI. You need to actually get in a real crane. I would not trust anybody who did it on VR, right, and got certified. But so that's kind of what we're also, I think, seeing in the space. And you go to ASU GSV and it's like 100 VR companies, I would say, trying to, figure out how to play in this space. But also exciting because, fast way to get skills and competencies.
Yeah, I like your mention of simulations too, because we can even do some low end with something like Copilot. Students can do those sort of things on their own too. And I think Alan wants to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking through this, and it seems like the one thing that AI has that is necessary now is this concept of multimodal assessment, because probably the first thing it seems to me everybody was talking about this last year when ChatGPT came out. The question is, how authentic is authentic assessment? Because historically that's been written work, and ChatGPT's really good at doing written work. And it's getting better and better at not being detected too. So having those multimodal ways to be able to do, whether it's VR assessment, the platform we provide, screen share assessment, video assessment, where students record themselves or record their screens, and other students can collaborate by annotating that. Building in, create a video and relate this to a personal experience. Okay. AI is not very good at that. I was talking to an instructor who said that he created an assignment like that, and the first student he read, the first sentence was, "Well, I'm not a human, so I don't have experience."
Busted.
Yeah. So I mean, sure, AI has forced us into this, but in a way, this is a good thing, right? Because this gets to UDL. Being able to incorporate video, being able to incorporate screen share, VR, whatever it is, it's pushed us, but it's pushed us to be better.
Right, like giving students choice and what types of projects that they participate in. Maybe that speaks to their skill set. Maybe they already have some skills in video. Maybe that's something they enjoy. Maybe they like photography. They've all got a fantastic device for creating, for being a creators as well, usually. Yeah, those are great points. Absolutely. Let's touch on maybe kind of one big idea topic, and then we will take some questions from the audience. So you guys be thinking about a question you might have. But just sort of a big idea, what are some of the emerging trends and research in AI and education that could shape the future of assessments? Maybe what gaps or opportunities do you see for even further innovations? It's a big question. Anything new and emerging? You mentioned VR, which is great.
Yeah, so I do think, in this concept, like we've kind of hit on it, of personalized learning or adaptive learning. And that's, I think it's tough to do with AI now. We're looking at how to, we do it in a way by giving each student real-time feedback, but then because we can help you build an assignment at a certain Bloom's taxonomy level, right? You say, I want Bloom's taxonomy level 4. I want an assignment written at this level. We'll build a prompt for you. You can do that through our software. But what happens if a student, doesn't do a good job? Can you then recreate that at a Bloom's taxonomy level 3, have that student do that, start understanding that, and then have them work their way up to that, level 4, or something like that. So I think when I think of it, I think personalized learning, adaptive learning, each student even having a unique experience, and maybe the assignment they get being built at their level, which may in fact be different from the level of the rest of the course, at least at first, to help bring them up to the level of the rest of the course from a student equity standpoint.
Yeah, good points about even deeper personalized learning, going further with not just, what am I interested in, but sort of what level is this student coming in at? How can I take them from this level to this level and take this student from this level to this level, and help build everybody up?
So I'll add to that. So Nora, you brought up a really good point about with ChatGPT, which is kind of wild that it was only 2 years ago, right? I mean, now even my 10-year-old utilize, it's kind of wide open space, you know, is learning talking to ChatGPT, asking questions. They're now utilizing it in their curriculum in 5th grade, or understanding, you know, and deep fakes, of course, AI, because that's fascinating. But but what is really kind of interesting that I see is, so we have this tool, right? And I know right when it happened, a lot of institutions, we were kind of on committees and they were going, okay, like, is cheating just going to just be wide open? Let's ban it on campus. And then it went like, oh, that's a bad idea. Because, you know, if you ban things from 19-year-olds, what happens, right? So, you know, there's been a whole kind of understanding and body of work around what are the right policies to have about this. I mean, I will say Auburn and Asim and I, because it was interesting, we were at a conference last year and speaking about this, and he was, you know, on one side of the fence talking about all the great thing, how Auburn's embraced it, the courses, all the work that's been going on. But we had a dean from a different university that they were still in the banning mode because they didn't quite know how to navigate on their campus. So it is this interesting space about how do we use this and how do we use generative AI in a way that, you know, we can interact with, we can learn for assessments. And so when I think of kind of future, a lot of what we're now seeing, so like I said, I also work in certification, attend a lot of those conferences. Well, there's always been, we need, you know, a lot of the reason why assessment is so expensive or even so hard to do is because unless you're a psychometrician, you know, if you're a faculty member, how do you know the reliability and validity of the questions I'm asking? How do I know the students are learning it? I mean, it's always, I hated creating assessments, by the way. I love teaching, but, you know, and then it's the same problem set for certification. That's why it's so expensive to get a lot of these admissions exams because it's so expensive to create the questions. What's interesting that is happening in real time is utilizing AI to create assessment and to create questions. Now, it's kind of a bit of a wild, wild west, I'll be honest, but it's interesting that because of the cost and just the acts, you know, if you can say, okay, at an 8th grade level, create a question that's testing X, Y, Z. Why wouldn't you use that tool instead of paying SMEs to come to a focus group and, you know, doing all this other work? So that's even, you know, without even talking about VR and some of these expensive things, it's really interesting because it's also like, well, how do we handle that? Is that okay to do that? You know, what about copyrighted questions? Are they fake? You know, so I'm very interested just in industry. Like even I would love, you know, to understand how Auburn uses it or other institutions. Like, do you allow your faculty to use it to create assessments and questions? Do you not? And navigating the policies around that, I think is really interesting. But kind of also, you know, happening probably in real time, but also in the future, I think we're going to see it like even the LSAT is using generative AI to create test questions. So, you know, and that's probably one of the most, I would say, traditional type of assessments. So,
yeah. And is that much different than having a giant test bank from which you could pull things anyway?
Exactly. Right. Loved that test bank in psych. Psych 101. Yeah. But exactly. So it's even hard, I would think, to navigate like what's ethical and what's not, right? As someone teaching a class when it's so accessible and easy, you know, to use some of these things.
I think one thing to remember with AI tools, it's still evolving, right? That whole sort of all these tools. We just spoke about hallucination, I think, in the previous session. Fact checking is so important. Not everything that AI tools give us is true. It's so important to make sure that actually there is always a human in the loop. If you're doing an assignment and actually getting 40% of answers from ChatGPT that are actually not correct, factually not correct, like you're going to fail. There is a lot of that. And the tools are still evolving, so they're not perfect. And I think one of the things that we need to be keeping in mind, like while it's easy to create assessments and replicate them, it's also for students especially, we need to be mindful in terms of how they use ChatGPT and how we as a faculty, as like many sort of ed tech companies there, we are mindful of teaching students on how to use ChatGPT for their assessments and for assignments. In terms of assessments, I just wanted to also mention that there are a number of like ed tech space companies, like I know Coursera is testing a lot in terms of peer review so that students can get immediate feedback. You know how when you have a big online space and learners are all over the world, it's so difficult for learners to actually, you know, dedicate time and do it, to provide feedback on time to other learners. And so that peer review was really lagging in terms of like getting it really good quality results so that learners don't have to wait for a long time. I think it's true in many places, but now AI is actually helping to solve for that, because AI can provide that peer review, right? But then those rubrics are so essential that you were mentioning about, just like, what is the expectation? It's not just like asking, hey, this is what I think about the course, and then you get a feedback, but the rubrics and how you establish those expectations and actually being very transparent with the learners, what they are expected to submit as a result as part of the submission is very crucial, because and now as we work with Gen AI tools, having those rubrics very clear at the point when we design our assessments or any assignments that we provide to students is also crucial. So that rubric becomes then sort of a next level. Do we get it right? Is it bias free? And sort of checking all the elements to make sure that there is an inclusivity of views and perspectives, and there is not going to be any bias as a result of it. And a lot of testing, and every tool you're gonna use may give you slightly different response. So it's really testing through various tools as well in terms of like what you're gonna get. It's a minefield at the moment, but I think we need to be evolving with that.
Yeah, exactly, which is why it's important to teach those students those AI literacy, critical thinking skills, so they can know how to use the AIs properly, like not just saying, can I have feedback on my writing, but compare my writing to this rubric. Where are some gaps? Where are some places that I've succeeded? Where are some things that I've, maybe missed some things, and that sort of thing. Providing those guidelines to students is really crucial.
I think the feedback piece is really kind of stirs me, because I think that that's important. Everything that we've talked about, and this is, I feel like my responses are almost like anti-AI, and I'm not saying that at all, but I think we need to focus on the learner and our objectives for them as they are learning. What are the competencies that they need to have at the end of this? And so when you have that opportunity to be able to use these tools critically, as it's been pointed out many times over the day, they're developing, they're changing, they're getting better, they're becoming more accurate in many different ways. But there's still enough doubt. And so if we aren't critical consumers of that information, just like we went through the transformation when Google came out and all this information was at everybody's fingertips, and you have to, cut through, okay, well, who's paying for this, that it's at the top of my list? Is it good information? Is it biased? Is it a product of a hallucination? And so centering the human aspect of that, I think, is probably the most important thing that we can teach our students, because it's, you can say, I've heard many people talk about how it's unethical and how it's not right to do this, and how can you teach ethically using a tool that isn't ethical in its existence, and all of these arguments. But the fact of the matter is, it's here, and we have to learn how to deal with that. So the first time I spoke with someone, I was sitting at a table at a conference, and this person said, I'm going to bring back the blue books. I have read enough handwritten stuff in my life that I don't ever want to do it again. The big thing, my big takeaway after teaching during lockdown was that I never, ever want to stand in line at the copier again. So, these advancements at first and these changes are so frightening, but if we find these ways to use them and then to look and see, yes, we should ask, should we use this? How should we use this? Our students are using it, so we need to figure out not how to beat them, but how to help them do it in a more in a way that enhances their skills and prepares them for these jobs that, my high school teachers all said, well, wait until you get to college and then wait until you get into the workforce, and how these things are going to be so different, and you're preparing students for a future that we don't know. Well, that future is really here. I have a great imagination, and I could never have imagined this 2 years ago, prior to that. Maybe that's my short-sightedness, but it's interesting to me. But again, centering the learning, centering that pedagogy, working product pedagogy, whatever that product is, that you're using is key to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate your comments on thinking we should always be thinking about student-centered learning and how we can incorporate that and what tools are going to be best and what are some ways we can use AI and personalized learning and help them use these different tools to assist them. And also at the same time, sort of leaning into ourselves as the instructor, as the subject matter expert, and being able to guide them and kind of leaning into that human expertise that we can bring to them. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate y'all. What we'd like to do now is maybe take a couple of questions from the audience. If you have a question, please go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. And then if you stand up and speak your question rather loudly, it should be fine because we have microphones in this room that should pick you up, no problem, for the online attendees as well. Okay? Questions? Yes, sir.
In this age of AI, does someone really need a teacher to learn something?
Does someone really need a teacher to learn something in this state of AI?
Teaching board, AI-enabled, who is more, who has more knowledge, more resources to guide students than a human teacher.
Good question.
And if yes, then what are the new skills that teacher need to have? Apparently, it does not need to have a knowledge of subject matter. It does not need to know classroom management. It does not need to have, entertaining, whatever. So what are the skills that teachers should have in the new AI age, if teachers have to exist anyhow?
What are the new skills that instructors are going to need to have in this age of AI, where it's kind of like when Google first came out, we have all this knowledge at our fingertips?
Yeah, I think the role of educators is not diminishing at all. Completely, 100% is there. I think we're just evolving. We have evolved through years when internet came in. We have adjusted. We started to work differently with our students. We know that there is a technology that everybody's using, and we started using it as well for our curriculums and for education. And I think with AI going forward is, it's understanding how the landscape, how the market is going to change, right? It's hard to picture it because it's moving so fast. And just talking to employers, like the Coursera CEO, when it all came 2 years ago, he was so passionate about AI. He started to talk to everybody in the space, in different industries, like, how is it changing the workplace? What are you doing? What kind of skills do you need? What kind of graduates do you need? And it's changing really fast in the workplace as well, because companies are automating, companies requiring new skills, companies want people who understand AI, or some of them who can work with AI. And so I think the level of sort of our graduates is going to evolve as well in different ways across different disciplines. And I think for educators, it's understanding step by step, like, where is that sort of a change going? What are the new skills that those employers where mostly sort of, graduates go to? How is that landscape changing? What are the new skills being required? I remember there was a number, I think last year in 2023, there was 30% of jobs mentioning the skill prompt engineering. Last year, right? And I think that was big last year. And I think this year is probably we are realizing that prompt engineering in itself shouldn't be a certain skill for one person. We are now talking about, everybody should be able to prompt engineer, like to be able to do prompts. And so it's just to the point that the landscape is changing so quickly, but the new skills are evolving, and it's about understanding what the workforce will need, because we need to prepare our young students, young people to the workforce. And educators have a key role to play in this. We need to be guiding, we need to be shaping, and we need to be working with industry as well. And I think like that industry connection, I don't think it was mentioned a lot today, but it was nice to see NVIDIA today. I think yesterday there were some speakers, sort of that integration of like companies speaking to educators and actually finding a common ground in terms of like, hey, this is what we need tomorrow. Can we work together to make sure that universities are providing the skills? I think is going to be very crucial.
So perhaps adaptability in the instructors, right, to adjust to the changing workforce. You're right. Yesterday, we heard a lot about the future of work. What does that look like when AI is embedded into the ecosystem of your computer program and that sort of thing?
Figuring out how to use that output and whether and in what ways. Like, I don't know about anyone else, but I'm pretty sure I'm not alone that anything I've ever put into ChatGPT and gotten back, I've had to adapt it and change it. And I think that takes a certain skill level that sometimes, especially younger students, may not have the understanding of how to do that. And I believe that, and this is kind of, it feels like an old-fashioned skill, but fact checking, you've got to know that you're putting out there. There are a lot of consequences for putting out wrong information when you're on the job.
So when you first started your question, what was interesting to me is just thinking about, for instance, being in a classroom at Auburn in person with a faculty member. During COVID, it was interesting. Assessments and education went online for the most part, right, for everyone. And we were all ready to get back in the classroom. There's something about being in the room, learning. I completely agree. I think that educators have to think about how do we teach our students to think critically, right? But there's something so powerful about being in a space and place together. Now, does online education provide access and opportunity? Maybe you can't take a class at a certain time because of a commitment. I can take it online, but I don't think there's going to be a seismic shift that it's going to be infused, or there's going to be more hybrid modalities, more, ways of thinking around that, but nothing is going to replace the human as far as I can see, Yeah,
if a student has a more humanistic need, it's not going to be able to address that, right? Like, hey, I've just been really struggling with this concept and I have this sort of emotional issue that needs to be dealt with. Another human can help them with that, not necessarily an AI, right? Yeah, good points.
Yeah, and another thing I was going to add is like AI, it may get there one day. We don't know what it's going to do now, but like I think AI can help you from an instructional design perspective, but you're still going to need a subject matter expert. ChatGPT, that's the one that I'm most familiar with. It is inherently people pleasing. It's trying to make you like it more than it cares more about that than factual information.
Yeah.
So depending on how you phrase your question, if you ask ChatGPT, how did the British win the American Revolution? It may tell you, well, George Washington got shot and killed in that, end of the effort. It may well tell you that because it actually doesn't know if you are trying to write some sort of historical fiction or not. So you still need subject matter experts who actually understand this to be checking that. But the way that I see the role evolving even more so is because your time can be freed up. Sure, we can build the assignment for you. We can build a rubric for you, and we can even coach students against meeting that rubric criteria. But the other thing that we can do is we can help you identify at-risk students, okay? And so having your time freed up so that you're not going back and forth telling students like, hey, go back and check your grammar, go back and cite your sources, but instead analyzing the data that AI is giving you as far as student risk. Is this student connecting with their peers? Is this student, getting in and doing their assignments early in the week and then being the human to reach out to those students? because AI is doing other things for you, it's freeing up time for you to be more like a mentor, a shepherd to the classroom. In a way.
Holistic
Yeah.
sort of educator. Good
I
point.
wanted to mention just one point, and I think you just started it. Sort of this human factor is so important because I think we are so glued into our screens and we do everything on our computers, and now like we'll be doing more using all the tools we have. But yesterday I was meeting the business school, some people, and I literally just went and look what are the top 10 most required skills by employers. Communication always comes top 3, right? Everywhere. The soft skills, the leadership, the teamwork, the management. Nobody, like machines cannot teach that better than humans, better than faculty, better than those people who are actually leading and managing and communicating effectively. I think this is one of the key pieces. And again, having child in the college now, like I'm very passionate about it, and having more children is so important not to lose a human touch and actually be able to always practice this in the classroom, the teamwork, this attachment to peers, to the professor, building trust with the faculty is so important to actually having a very healthy life in college and graduating successfully.
Yeah, good point. Being able to have that human connection, I'm sure, is one of the highest points of retention for students, right, on campuses. This is why, Auburn, and I'm sure other universities that you guys have worked with, have programs like the First 56. If you can get students involved in an activity or a club or help plug them into a niche interest of theirs outside of their courses, then that improves retention as well and helps them feel more connected. So that connectivity is definitely a key part. Another question. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to hit on the notes of your real-time feedback and bias. So my question has to deal with if you could specifically, or speaking specifically on the real-time feedback, can you share any known biases inherent in your tools? In other words, what might your tools have been accused of from the end user? Whether or not you've been able to verify the presence of that bias, and how do you resolve these issues of biases that you were able to verify in your tools?
So potential biases and feedback tools.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that because we haven't gotten that feedback yet. So our feedback tool, which coaches the students specifically on whatever rubric you put in there, we have not heard anything on that. And now the tool's only been out for like 3 months, so maybe we will.
It probably goes back to the data it's been provided with, potentially, right?
So I can speak to that part. Our company doesn't have an AI feedback tool, although I'm interested in exploring all these that I'm learning about. But we do use AI in some of our solutions. And you're right, it's as part of, you have to have bias into consideration, right? Because it's building on the use cases that you've put in the system. So for instance, and we've even, so as I said, remote proctoring is a major part of our business. So we've even pulled out of the AI game because of that in particular, because it's hard, you've got to train AI on use cases. And I think it's really it's navigating with design of, okay, what am I testing? You almost have to build it. And I'm not an AI engineer, by the way, but I do oversee our compliance. And you're right, a big part of using these tools is you have to build that basically into the methodology, right? You have to understand this is building off the data we have, and what are the outcomes. And I think that's probably key in a whole body of work that is just now has been focused on for sure. But I think people are trying to understand around it, that it's a real issue. And that gets into the ethics of AI use, of course, and policies around that. So that's not an answer. So you gave us a good question, but definitely I think should be in consideration with any tool and the design, right? Alan, we'll look for feedback in a few months, right?
Yeah.
I can maybe briefly say I'm very new to Grammarly, just to say that, right? But as a writing communication tool, we have a team of linguists continuously refining and getting feedback from users and looking and sort of improving it all the time. So I will look out for any biases. Thank you for I've only been in Grammarly for 1 month, but that's sort of, I'm just thinking through. I don't know of any particular examples, but what we do have built in with Grammarly for education sort of a package is that any customer, if it's a company or an institution, can have their own style guides, right? And they can include those style guides into the Grammarly. And so, and it's basically aimed at eliminating, reducing any biases, if there are any particular sort of cultural preferences or religious sort of things that the university wants to keep in mind, some sort of language that should be inclusive and friendly to everybody. So that style guides would include that language, and everybody using it within an institution would be able to sort of use the same language. That's sort of included in the Grammarly, but I will keep on checking on the other examples. Thank you for this question.
And it touches on what you all mentioned earlier, universal design, and addressing that from the beginning, having human trainers, you mentioned that. Also, many of these tools, I'm sure, have feedback options built right within them. So if there were something to come up, you could provide feedback right then, right? And that helps improve the model. Many of these are built on the data that they've been provided with. So making sure that data is clean and inclusive are very good points that you all made. Other question? You had one?
I want to make a statement about, I want to go back to what you all were saying about the human element, and we need the human element. I think I'm 50-50 on that. I'm going to tell you why. One of the things I'm looking forward to as far as working with AI is the safety of our children in school. We have school shootings that are totally out of control. I hear a lot of parents say, my kids are going to be homeschooled. I've never bring my child back to school again. Now, this can start elementary all the way up through college. So if you want that human element, we're going to have to do something about that. Otherwise, I'm totally for AI teaching my child from birth to death. It's ridiculous that we cannot control what goes on. Somebody could walk in here right now with a gun and shoot everybody in here. There's no safety. I don't see any safety in this room at all. So, before you keep harping on the human element, we've got to get ourselves straight. With this, our AI I do see AI taking over in the home, in the classroom, and I'm not concerned about teachers not having a job. We'll just have a job remotely from home.
Well, school safety kind of goes beyond the scope of this particular panel. We're kind of focused on assessment, but there might be some tools out there that are AI, such as photography tools, video tools, things like that, that maybe, yeah. Sure,
Would never be without the human element. It's possible that we.
Well, within sort of the scope of the instructor role, I think we agree we can be within the human element. If we're talking about external forces, that's a little bit beyond us at this moment, though. We are, but thank you. Yes, it is a good point. We are at 1:55. If you could join me in thanking our panelists for their information they've shared today. Thank you all for being here, and you guys can get ready for the next session in a few moments.